Hello there, YouTube. Hello there, Hero Club faithful. I'm Wheelchair21, one of your co-founders and co-creators of this site, editor-in-chief. And joining me, as always, to co-host one of these interviews is SoundOut12.
Welcome, everybody. We got a brand new interview for us to do today. I flubbed my line.
Don't worry, we're going to flub something more than once. It's not a Hero Club stream or interview or, podcast if there's at least a little bit of flubbing when you can't really fully edit as much as we'd like to. But as everyone also knows, SoundOut is not just a content creator on YouTube. He is one of the other co-founders of this site and whatnot, alongside our other friends who usually can't make it, like Ben and Project. Joining us tonight for our interview is the creator of Titanic Creations, McClintock. Thank you for letting us interview.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about what we're doing over here and all the fun, exciting stuff that's going to be coming out soon from us.
All right. And for those who don't know, Titanic Creations is a indie toy company. They do like vinyls. They do plastic figures. They have articulations, static ones. They're going to be doing accessory sets in the future. And they like to do original IPs as well as a lot of the obscure niche kaiju from B-tier science films, sci-fi films, as well as other international kaiju that not just from Japan. We have the Korean titles like Yongary, Pulsagari, as well as you've done the British Gorgo, which we'll talk a lot more about those in a little bit. So for our interview, normally we mostly have done interviews with voice actors. We've done interviews with, directors and producers, and it's usually like, how'd you get into the entertainment industry? But since you're now obviously a toy maker, we would like to actually know, like, what got you into kaiju films, and how did you actually get into the greater fandom at large?
So really, I think I follow a very familiar track for a lot of kaiju fans. I was young. I loved dinosaurs, really big on the dinosaur thing when I was 3 and 4. And then my dad, I think it was on HBO or some channel, was like, so there's this dinosaur, but it breathes fire, right? And like that was a whole step up, right, for especially 4 or 5-year-old me. And just kind of from the beginning, I was just hooked on it. I loved Godzilla, this whole giant monster destroying buildings. Then like you kind of fall in love with the kind of cheesy special effects of the earlier Godzilla films. It's this person in this suit and everything. And then slowly I started really collecting figures because Godzilla figures are so much fun to have. And they're these really intense pieces on your shelf. And slowly over time that grew. And then 2006 was the first year I went to G-Fest. Went there almost every year. Really just grew to love this in a big way. And then slowly over time, there was this gap right when the movie monster series Bandai's ended to kind of 2014-ish when the new Godzilla came out, where like really if you weren't collecting the super high-end X pluses and S.H.MonsterArts barely was getting started then, it was a very dire market of lack of options for quite a few people, especially entry-level collectors. And I think that kind of transitioned a lot into why we ended up starting Titanic Creations and what the goal was with our company.
Yeah, no, because I'm assuming you're around the same age as me and SoundOut at least, because we grew up in the 90s, myself and SoundOut. Were you a fan of the Treadmasters toy line at all growing up, or was that already gone before you really got into this?
Basically, the Treadmaster line was gone. The biggest thing that I collected that you could get in a store was all the Bandai America ones, especially the Pack of Destruction. Right?
Okay.
I always forget what it's called, but those were the like buy-in-store things, and then many nights on eBay looking at random listings of imported toys, and definitely had a very bizarre collection as a child of toys that I don't think many people would have expected anyone to really care about.
Yeah, because since you say that, that means at least we have at least probably maybe like a 4-year, 6-year gap, maybe at least an age range between us and that. Because like I do recall the Destruction Pack. I think it was like a lot of really small like vinyl PVC figures. Some of them were, I believe.
Yeah.
And then they were releasing sort of the movie monster series with like these really huge cards, and like Playmates kind of mimicked that when they got the line recently by having them in these like boxes, but like zip tied in.
Yeah. I mean, I have some weird nostalgia for all that, just because I mean they were like only at Toys R Us, and Toys R Us doesn't even exist anymore. So
Yeah, no, I remember the first time. It was right before Toys R Us picked up the license, at least for me. I remember I went into, I think, a KB Toys right when they were dying, right when they were closing out. And right around those years, like the last year or two of KB Toys, I remember going in, and I think Final Wars had just come out in Japan. And all of a sudden, like, the Final Wars vinyls are on your shelf, and it's Godzilla, Anguirus, Rodan, and Gigan, I think, were the first ones to come out in the line. And then they were like, oh, here's Kiru, and here's another version, and here's 54, and Rainbow Mothra. And I was just like, this is weird. Why are they just now giving us the Japanese stuff in an American box? And I don't know what that mentality was when they decided to do that, but it was the funniest thing ever. Because like for years, I remember going to these like hobby stores which would sell the same product, and they're like, you buy it for like $35 versus the Bandai release, which was the same product, and they were just like $15 or $20. So that was the funniest thing back then. So following up, obviously, how you got into the fandom, going to G-Fest and whatnot, how did you manage to like start this venture for Titanic Creations? Like, what really made you go, I can do this, and go and actually make the company?
So this 2017, I go to G-Fest, and I'd always toyed around with like making my own monster. I feel like most people have had this diddly at some point where they're like, oh, you know, he does this, he does this. It was never actually materialized in anything. But then I met Dope Pope, who, I don't know if you guys follow him on Instagram, really talented 3D artist who does amazing stuff. He now works with Mezco and X Plus and everyone. But I met him. We ended up really hitting it off, and I ended up just commissioning him to make Titanicus, who is our company mascot. He's on the logo, and he gets to be, you know, the mascot and everything. We had him do a sculpt, and then it was really just all about, after that, I was like, well, and then we posted it, got decent traction, and then it was just like, all right, well, how the hell am I going to do this? And it kind of progressively grew over that point, where it was like, okay, well, there seems to be an interest for this. And then it's like, all right, so how do we find a factory? How do we, you know, how do you actually make 1,000 of anything, right? Because the first step was we were like, maybe 3D print it, but then 2018 3D printers were a lot worse than they are now. Like, there's some very hilarious images I have saved of like this absolutely terrible 3D print I got from someone who's on Facebook, reached out so they could do it. But all that, and then really was just kind of brute force of trying to be like, we're going to do this, we're going to figure out how to do it. And then slowly over the past 6 years, it's kind of grown into something a lot larger than I would have originally imagined.
All right. Yeah, because I was always wondering, because it was like, because even in your interviews, you were like, it just happened. And I was like, huh. So like, that's interesting that it really was just like, can we do this? How can we do this? Because I was always surprised, because usually when I talk to other people who had made companies, or just, I wouldn't say they're big names, but like when you talk to people who've like worked for Super 7, when you talk to people who work for like Nacelle, they're just like, we had to really struggle. Like, some of us started as like comic book guys, and some of us started as like a hobby store or a fanzine, and then it evolved as we made more connections. But you were like, no, we're just gonna do this and see if it flies, pretty much, right?
I think that's the best way to say it. Like, really, the goal was, I just wanted to make this Titanicus figure, the first one, and put it out there and let people see it and own it, and maybe make a few dollars off it. It wasn't supposed to be like a huge profitable enterprise at that point. And that was the goal, was we were gonna like the original vision for Titanic Creations, we were going to put out an original kaiju every year. We were going to sell 1,000 of them at $30 a piece and basically barely break even and just kind of do that year over year. Eventually, though, it kind of got to the point where that was like very dicey because all it takes is just one really bad release and you're toast. But really, the whole goal was always to make toys because the way I always connected with these movies was through action figures. And it felt like the most real way to, especially from when I was growing up, because like half of the movies didn't come out here when they originally came out in Japan. You'd wait 10 years. And I remember watching Final Wars on like a Taiwanese DVD that wasn't even in English. I had no idea what the plot was, but big monster fights were really great. So, but that's kind of how it started and how it's kind of evolved going forward.
All right. Now, this is just a weird question regarding Titanicus. Was it always like an OC character that you had prior to that, or did you like start inventing it when you had the idea of let's make figures? Like, was this something you had worked on as a teenager or a child, or was it more fresher?
The Titanicus thing comes from a very annoying place in my brain where there's this. It was in the Dark Horse comics. There was this model kit that someone made that I saw at G-Fest. It was a G-Fan cover at one point, which was Godzilla sinking the Titanic, which cool, but like my brain really frustrated me because I'm like, well, all these people say it was an iceberg, right? So what we wanted to do, the whole point was we wanted to make a monster with a big iceberg on its back that could justify sinking the Titanic, and also that people would, still believe that it was an iceberg in universe. And so that idea pondered around probably for 6-7 years. And then it wasn't until I met Dope Hope, because I can't draw my way out of a circle. I just can't. It's not good at all. And really, he was able to visualize it. It kind of ended up, falling into that classic lizard Godzilla feel, which is, is what it is. But it definitely was just more about this kind of like wanting to have something that looked like it could have been a reason that the Titanic was sunk. And then there's always a story that kind of I felt resonated well as a monster origin story, and it seems to have done better than I thought it would have.
All right. Sound out. Could you take 4 through 6?
Yeah. So in terms of the comics, how did you come up with the other original kaiju featured in those comics?
So after we did Titanicus, we went back to the drawing boards. We wanted to do something that was like completely off the walls, not very familiar to what, the standard kaiju shapes. And that's kind of how Nosferodon came about. And really that was all design work. We had this great artist, who I think was in college at the time, Amber Ansdale, and we just asked her to do something crazy. We had like a bunch of random animals like snakes, and we wanted to have transparent plastic on it, and it kind of all was over the place. And then he looked at it like, it kind of looks like a vampire. What if he like could do some vampire things? And then it all morphed into that. Then going from there, we just started wanting to do cooler things. And well, the first basic idea was we're like, well, what if we made a cobra and a snake? And so that's how Scraeus was born. Not a very exciting story, but he hits the mark as being, two scary animals put together, this Crimea type kaiju that is very common across media. And then finally, Grafixus was 100% based upon the on-May 1994 Godzilla film, where there's the monster, the Griffin. And we wanted to really find a way to produce it in a way that wasn't just clearly a copycat, but also played homage to this character that I feel a lot of people feel was left out in a big way, as I know a lot of people really yearn for the Stan Winston Godzilla. And I know tons of people. I mean, there's an April Fool's joke every year about S.H.MonsterArts making a Stan Winston Godzilla figure. Then all that kind of came together. We had the designs, and we realized we needed a story to go along with it. And so we kind of played around with this whole history idea with Titanicus, and that kind of is how we landed on this bigger plot that takes place during World War II, and classic monster fight with a world at war, and it really played well together, and it let us, grow the story beyond just cool-looking monsters.
Well, cool. You've mentioned in other interviews how you want to work on figures first, and then comics, and then hopefully animations in the future. Is your company's kind of plan was to mix in original IPs with the more obscure movie monsters, or is there some
Yes.
like what's the balance there, for example?
So what we found is these obscure monsters have a very, very hardcore cult following, especially monsters like Gorgo. Surprisingly popular, that I did not realize until we went forward and made the figure. And we decided kind of like we were going to make the figure, and that went really well. And then we released a second issue, which was based upon the Ditko version, and that all sold out. And so we wrote Gorgo Legacy, which should be shipping soon if Zoop ever decides to print the book. But that's a whole other thing. But that's been a big thing, is we really thought that if we were going to continue in comics, we need to be more focused on the obscure monsters as the leading force, and the original monsters being secondary characters that kind of lead into that. As Gorgo Legacy is a sequel to our original book Soul War, but at the same time, it doesn't rely heavily on you reading the past book to understand what's going on.
So they work standalone, more like one-shots that kind of connect together?
Yes, and the plan with Gorgo was to do 3 60-page graphic novels, with Gorgo Legacy being the first one, and hopefully when everyone can read the book, it kind of shows how there is open interpretation for part 2.
Okay. So regarding the comics, have you had any trouble selling them due to the current market and customer base? And would offering like digital copies as an option affect the company at all?
So comic books are a very tough business in general. I think that could be shown that Diamond Distribution recently filed for bankruptcy. Really, as soon as you lose Marvel or DC, it's incredibly hard to be profitable in this business. The plan is to eventually offer a digital copy option. The issue with that has more been a website problem than a profitability issue. As the way we view our comic books, these are not profit drivers of the company. They're much more loss leaders, where we want people to read the comic books. It's more important that people get invested and are interested in this, and then they go to the toys, which is very much kind of, your Transformers model, your excuse me, off the top of my head, but most of your 80s toys brands follow the same model of, hey, let's make a comic book, that'll get people in, and then the toys were the secondary factor. We kind of did that backwards, but really the biggest thing about the comic books, they just need to be good quality and not be terrible losses for us. And really, we have been planning how we want to explore it into a digital scope without having to rely heavily on Amazon and Comic X to do that.
All right. Yeah, I know, because the comic industry's one I follow. It's a messy business. It always kind of has been, but it's particularly right now, everything's a little bit in flux, especially with the whole Diamond situation and the way that Comixology has been handled under Amazon, and it's been tricky.
It's not for the faint of heart, and I definitely do not envy a lot of comic artists who that's like their thing.
Yeah, when I saw the book on the site, I looked if there was a digital copy, because I said to myself, oh, if there's a digital copy, I could order it then, have enough time to read it a couple of times, and come up with questions. But I was afraid that if I had ordered it like maybe a week or two ago when I had messaged you, how long would it actually take to get to me, and how long would I have to read it between the time before we had to put things off? Would I have enough time to read it and thoroughly be like, oh, I want to talk about these story points. So maybe if like in the future I can get that one, and we'll have to have you back to just talk about the creative process in writing those stories, since I barely know anything outside of, I think, the preview pages and what people have told me, like you said, about it being a World War II story, a very like mystery world at war, like Nazis trying to do their occult stuff and whatnot.
Very, very Raiders of the Lost Ark vibes that you get from especially the preview pages online. But yeah, this is a thing we definitely are working towards fixing. It's been kind of a big month of us just kind of do website quality of life things at the moment. I mean, the issue is I mean, it's all very jargon
It's
based.
taxing. It's very
Yeah.
taxing. Because even
And
we know what you mean. Because we've been wanting to overhaul our site just to look better as a media site, but we just haven't
right.
had the time to. Our other friend who's a webmaster, they are still doing school while I think getting their doctorate while also doing their time while the time where you have to actually go and work at a hospital while finishing up your program or whatever.
Oh, wow.
They're doing that, so they can't do their webmaster stuff that they were already trained for before they went into being a medical student. So
Oh, wow.
it's just like this huge layer of knowing when you can do it, how you can do it, how much it costs, how much are you gonna have to sacrifice before any slight returns happen. No, I completely understand. And this is just a question. When it comes to animation, have you guys considered doing maybe like the old format of like animated graphic novels where it's more like just kind of movable PNGs, like if you remember in the 2000s for the comics so far, or you want full on like 2D or 3D animation? Like, do you want like full cartoon level?
We have looked at doing the whole like the term is a motion comic.
Yeah.
Right. I think Watchmen did this, basically the Spawn show on HBO was majority this. But we did parts of it for some ads back in 2020 when the book first started shipping, and they turned out really great. I was really about it. It was just the question always was how we could animate the whole book and then also like make it so it wasn't just a YouTube video that got 500 views, because that would be not worth the investment. And really the biggest thing we found is the if you guys looked at our profile a bit, the 3D animations that we do with Lost Utopia films, those really resonate really well, and people really enjoy seeing these obscure monsters in a CGI realm, even if it's not Hollywood level.
I actually enjoyed seeing some of the early like test footage, I think, before the full videos came out. And like I was like, man, I can't wait to see it. And then I saw it and I was like, those are like really good. Like when there was like the preview clips and all that stuff before they dropped, I was like, this is I like when people can make 3D animated stuff that can still look almost movie level or at least children's media level without looking like it was done on 3D Max or whatnot, in 1998 or 2002. Like the stuff I was working on in like middle school and high school. Like if it looks like anything that almost looks like, and this is the thing, I love Beast Wars, but and Sound Out like reboot. Like if you can look better than that level of mainframe, you already won. If you can look better than 90s mainframe, I think you've already won. So for our next question, this is more or less, I found this to be a really interesting story that you had to tell in one of your interviews. And I was like, oh, I could just tell people to go check it out. But is there a way you could at least tell our audience in a bridge telling the interesting case of how you were able to acquire the Gorgo license? Because I thought it was like crazy, all that detail, like the details you went through to like,
I mean, this is a story I really love telling them, because so kind of some backstory. So we were at that point, we're at a very critical point as a company in general. We're having to decide what we're going to do going forward, and we don't have cash on hand to do Godzilla Hollywood licenses. So we are like, all right, we're going to go try to find all these one shot kaiju films, and the one we landed on was Gorgo. We're like, all right, great. So we started, we're like, well, MGM released the DVD, right? That's a good place to start. We emailed them. They're like, nope, no idea, not our problem. And then we start really going in depth, and we end up looking at these the copyright website. And the copyright website lists every transaction of a copyright. And there's this very weird point where you find Gorgo, and there's this quit claim on it from, I think it was the cinematographer of the film, towards BCI Entertainment, which is this DVD company out in Oklahoma. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll just call them. So I just cold call them on the phone. Guy answers, says he's interested, is very open to me writing him a check to do these figures. And that's basically how it went. And thank God they were very receptive to it. Also made it a lot easier than other licenses to just get the figure done and produced and all that. We weren't going back on revisions or anything, but it was very strange because the last place you would think the rights to Gorgo would be some DVD company in Oklahoma. And also the process of how it got there is beyond me. I never actually know exactly how the rights got to that point, but my understanding in a broader sense is a lot of these films pre-Star Wars, right, is the merchandise and distribution rights were not bundled together like they are currently. So they end up being split where MGM distributes the film, but they don't have the merchandise rights to sell merchandise from the film. And this is the same case with Reptilicus and a few other really obscure ones.
Yeah, because I remember the story when hearing it, you were like, it went from somehow the King's Brothers folding, which was like an Irish UK collab,
Yeah.
and then like the camera crew bought it, and then somehow the camera crew sold it off to another people, and then it ended up in the like you said, the VCI or whatever in Oklahoma got it and whatnot, and then the rest was history.
Yeah, and it's really these companies that go under, like King's Brothers and all these distribution companies, that if you can't find a human being that like knows somebody who knows something, it's almost impossible to get the rights to these done.
Yeah, because I think another monster you guys are doing or tried to do, you said, was Gappa, and for years I thought that license was like gone because so many public domain DVDs were out in North America. I just assumed that, oh, this one must be some lost studio, until hearing your interview, and also a couple of years back, the company that owned it put it out on Blu-ray. They're like, oh, we're putting it, and I was like, wait, this thing wasn't like studio wasn't lost. And so like I was looking, and like I saw the Blu-ray, and then I double checked when you did your interview, and I was like, that's crazy. That Nikatsu just is sitting on this film. I believe he said was the company or whatnot.
So I think that's correct.
I forgot which studio it was.
We send an email to them about every 3 months being like, so do you still want to make a toy? And they're like, yep, really do. Super excited. And I'm like, all right, can you sign the contract? I'm like, nope. Then we do this dance about every 3 months. It's very, very fun. And apparently because X Plus is actually releasing a Gappa figure this year as well. And we're really hoping we can still do that because it's a very fun film. But
it really is, because I know the whole controversy everyone's had with it regarding it being, is it 100% a ripoff of Gorgo? Is it just a cash grab for Godzilla? Is it a cash grab on Mothra and Rodan? Because it literally is a trifibious creature. It flies, it swims, it goes on the ground, it wants its child.
I mean, it's definitely not the most original movie, I think, ever, but it also has the best trailer ever, because you can know the entire film if you watch the American trailer, and they just have that guy yelling Gappa every 30 seconds, just in case you forgot the title of the film.
Yeah, no, that original trailer and that film, I find it so interesting, especially because like somehow the American release has like this weird lossy footage, because I found out the Japanese version, the scenes where it goes black and white was something that happened when it went international, but if you have the Blu-ray, allegedly those black and white scenes are not in black and white, if I recall correctly, but I could be wrong. I haven't checked the Blu-ray in a good minute. But yeah, no, I would love to see that.
I haven't seen Gappa. I mean, I think they showed it once at G-Fest forever ago, but
I had the weird pleasure of discovering it by accident, because I forget what group it was called. Like, they were like called Diamond Distributors or something, or Diamond something. They like somehow got all the Sandy Frank like releases ever, and then they like put them out on these like 2-disc 4-movie like collections, and they were like, oh, we don't have enough Gamera films, put Gappa on there. So like you randomly have like a bunch of Gamera films, and then it's like one Gamera and then Gappa on there. And so I saw it by accident because it was in a Gamera collection because they had nowhere else to shove it.
Yeah, I mean it's the funny thing about these one-off kaiju films is they end up just kind of being like bastard child, but nobody really talks about. And then you always are like, I feel like I've seen this somewhere, and it like triggers very strange memories for people. That's what I've learned.
There's like a Toei film called like The Magical Serpent, and that's its dub name, but its Japanese name is supposed to be more about the I think Legend of Jiraiya and all that stuff. But like the American name is like The Magical Serpent, but it's more about the Legend of Jiraiya and the Frog.
Which then makes it harder to track down and follow like information for it.
Yeah, it's a Toei film, and I think it was reissued recently in Japan or something. I'd have to double check, but that's actually something I would see you guys being able to maybe do one day if Toei decided to play ball, because there is a giant frog, there is a giant snake, there's another kaiju in it, and it's done, I think, mostly with like puppetry and not full on suits per se.
Right. I mean, there's a lot that we want to do. It's really, I mean, we've been trying with Sony forever to get the giant claw. It would be a hilarious figure. I mean, it would be giant. Yeah. It'd have like the big googly eyes.
Exactly.
Absolutely amazingly hilarious, especially, and it's a piece that people get and they like look what I have, right? And that's
exactly. Yeah, because I always forget, I think, that it was acquired by Sony due to how like studios were consolidated and whatnot. Because when you said that, I was like, wait, it's Sony now? And I completely forgot. It was like, I think a very early B Columbia film that they had bought from another studio that they bought out or whatnot. And that was actually another question that I had a little further down, because having done the research about how you said Reptilicus is hard because it somehow is in public domain, or there's another thing very similar to it that it's hard to do. Gappa has been held up, you said, in one of the more recent interviews I've seen you do, because I think you were talking about the release for Yongary, that Yongary 99 seems to have also like a licensing issue on who you're supposed to contact because it's split up in South Korea.
So Yongary with 2 G's, the 99 one, is owned by his name escapes me, but he's the director of Dragon Wars, and he's like wanted in South Korea for tax evasion, so he's not exactly easy to get in contact with. So that's just kind of one of those bizarre situations, because it's not the same character. It's Yongary with 2 G's, and so that's something we want to do. I mean, if we ever get in contact with him, I'd love to do Dragon Wars, a very terrible movie that I hold very close to my heart as something that I ended up going to see in theaters when there was no giant monster movies at all.
I remember the trailers for that and being like, I can't wait to see that when it's on TV, because I kept looking at it going, this looks interesting, but why does it also look so cheap? Like, I was confused why they were releasing it in theaters, because I was like, wait, this looks like a B film, like Sci-Fi would air.
It definitely was. It was an experience seeing it in a theater.
Oh, you saw it?
I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
I did not know you saw it in theaters.
I saw it in theaters and I never saw it again.
I remember I saw it like one night. It was like years later. And I was like, because I think the original US title was Dragon Wars. Then they shortened it to D Wars on home video or something. And then it came out as D Wars. And I was like, what's this D Wars? And then like when seeing the actual dragons and the snake cobra monster and all that stuff, actually I was like, oh, it jogged my memory. And I was like, oh, Dragon Wars. And it has like, I think the best scene ever though, of the woman like going into like the steel mesh fence thinking she can go through. Like,
oh yeah, there's like, because of the guy that walks through the fence,
yes.
And then the woman's like,
now
not.
Now, without, I guess, prying you for other titles that you want to work on, are there at least other public ones that you've already spoken about that you guys wanted to do that have similar issues to, like, say, Gappa or the Giant Claw? Like, because I'm pretty sure there's certain kaiju that I would like to ask if you're making, but rather than finding out if it's an NDA thing and us having to just scratch from the record, are there other public ones you've at least know that you told the public about having issues like this, or no?
I mean, we haven't had issues. We've had a lot of like just no contact return forms. Like Gilala is a monster we really wanted to do. Whatever, Monster X from Outer Space, I think is the title. Really fun film, and also I think it's like a car commercial too.
Yep.
But we tried to reach out to them, never heard back. There's always been a desire to do the Sao era Gamera license, but that's basically on hold until the because Sony's buying, I forget the name of the company that owns Gamera. Kawakata, yep. And so basically all of that is completely on hold. We
now, since this is also Kawakata and obviously it's on hold because of Sony, was there ever talks to do Daimajin? Because he's also a character, or does that not fit what you want to do?
So I think one thing we really, the whole Gazara release was a very big, I would say, experimental figure in the fact that it's not a monster with a tail who's in a Godzilla shape. And that really kind of let us kind of see the interest in that. And it also let us try out different color variants and see how that would work as a selling model, and learn a lot of things. And think saying like Daimaju and everything. Sorry, I'm having a rough time pronouncing words today. But that's something we'd want to do, really, because we want to have anything that a larger company doesn't touch be something that we want to push out, because our production numbers are significantly smaller than Bandai, even Super 7, really. And this is why we can do these, obscure figures, and really anything that kind of fits into that zeitgeist of giant monster, doesn't have a lot of figures, really works really well for us.
Yeah, because I assumed that like you guys eventually would want to try to tackle the big names if you were given a chance to, or not having so many, I guess, prerequisites or requirements about it. Because like having heard that with Sony with the Giant Claw, I'm assuming like one of their prerequisites, or at least how I assumed or understood, was that to do it you would need to be making more product and making X amount for them to go, let's do this. Which is something similar with like Super 7 saying when they got the Godzilla license, there was like a bit of like them having to go back and forth with making figures, as well as showing them this is what the stages are with the figure. And then, Toho would say yes to one version, but then say no to this figure. And so I'm assuming that's the bigger issue, is when dealing with the bigger names, is just the corporate mandates.
A lot of that, and it's a lot of NGs, so minimum guarantees are what a lot of these studios have. And when you're a major studio, it makes sense, right? Like, $5,000, $10,000 doesn't move the needle in a really big way, and they have to have their lawyers go over it, and they have to have corporate boardroom meetings, and 20 levels of redundancy that probably slows everything down. But it's mostly that, and we can bear some of that cost, but when we're making 1,000 figures, it's really hard to, justify that large of a guarantee. And really the goal is, as we kind of grow and grow our customer base, and we do new and exciting products, it allows us to eventually have cash on hand to pay those, and then also have a largest customer base. That way we put it up, it's not like, I'm just throwing money into a pit so I can have a giant claw figure on my shelf.
Yeah. This is actually interesting one, because a lot of my friends don't know this, and it's also obscure with other kaiju people that I talk to at times. Since you did pull Sagari, has anyone asked if you're going to do a Gilgamesh figure, which is its American counterpart?
So I have heard about Gilgamesh, but I believe Gilgamesh is owned by Disney.
Oh, really? Disney got the license. I don't recall. Odd.
I believe that is right. That could be wrong. I have looked into this. This was 6 months ago, but it's very fun how it's much more of like a princess film.
It is. It kind of is.
And it's adorable, 100%. And if we could ever do something like that, it'd be fun. I think we would very much lean into the fairy tale vibe of that, away from kind of our current giant monster in city destroying buildings hardcore that we're into. And I think it could be a fun like side piece. It just really, I mean, I'll make anything if I can sell 1,000 of them. That's basically where I'm at with it, is if I can find 1,000 people who want to buy something, we will make the giant monster figure. And because that's about the number when it makes sense to do it, especially when you're talking about joints and all the things that people want as collectors these days.
Yeah, I'm literally looking right now too to like double check to help you out by any chance of who owns what, because I'm like looking at all this information of what studio is behind it, and I'm like, man, this is digging, because like some of the pages don't even list it. I just didn't know this, and I've watched the movie multiple times. I didn't realize, and found out, you'll be surprised because you met this guy. Doug Jones was actually Gilgamesh in the movie. He played the Kaiju.
Wow. I've met Doug Jones like 2 times. I didn't know that. Now I need to meet him again and be like, do you remember this one movie you did forever ago that no one else remembers?
Oh man. Okay. So this is another question I have. This one was, I don't know if I was stupid and misheard you in some of your interviews, or I heard you correct, or I'm over analyzing what you said about something. You were talking, I forget which podcast it was, because I usually say names, but they're blurring in my head because I watched like 4 back to back. In one podcast, you were mentioning that when you go to do reissues, you're looking to do like color variants and exclude accessories at times to make a more value pack version so people can get the figure. However, is there any intent to have like just standard releases of figures in their original colors, or is that just something you're not going to do moving forward? Like that, like I said, it was either I misheard it or I misinterpreted how it was being explained.
So there is this very tough tightrope to walk where we don't want to reissue the exact same figure as a cheaper version, because there are 2 people who buy toys. There are people who buy toys to enjoy toys, and there's people who buy toys to resell toys. You have to be aware of both markets as a company. There's some companies that really lean into the secondary market of scalpers, like Mondo, where they don't want you to actually buy any of their Godzilla toys ever, because they're all sold out within 30 minutes. But it's kind of being understanding of that. It's part of the reason we haven't reissued the original Gorgo as just a figure in the original paint app, is because we said on the site that we were only going to make 1,000 of them. This is something that we have started kind of rewording on product pages now, where we'll say that the set is limited to X units, but not the color variant itself, because there are a lot of people who would like just the figure and they don't need, the 20 million crowdfunded add-ons, and we can sell that $30 cheaper than the big standard release. So the goal is we want to do different color variants and all that fun stuff. I think the Ditko Gorgo version was a really good one, as it had made sense and it was different enough from the original. So that's kind of the balancing point. Like, we've been thinking about what we want to do with Yongary at some point. There's a lot of weird ones. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but Yongary is a chicken nugget mascot in Korea currently.
I vaguely knew about that one.
And he's all bright yellow. It's very hilarious. That's apparently like what he's known for in Korea now, is that he sells chicken nuggets. Quite the fall from grace. But really, it's all, we want to do stuff where we can make figures that people want to buy from us and not always be on the secondary market, but at the same time remain in that level of exclusivity where it's interesting, and there is the idea that if you buy 3, there's a reason that it would be beneficial for you too.
Yeah, because I was sitting there and I was like trying to make sense of it, because I was saying to myself, well, what? Because it was like how you said, why don't we just make us a deluxe edition where it's all these accessories, then a standard version, and then future ones be later, like the recolors and stuff? Because that sounds like more feasible. Because then all parties are kind of, I feel like, met in that area. Because you do a special edition where it's like, oh, you want this one with, like, say, the stadium or whatnot with Yongary, where it has all that cool stuff, or and then you could have just Yongary, that could work, because the issue I often see, especially now with Haya toys, is they are cooking really well on Monsterverse, where they've been able to convince my dumbass to buy like the same Godzilla mold in like 6 different variant colors, because they were like, yo, we really made a good mold that's like, what if NECA just put in more articulation? And I was like, oh, okay.
There you go.
Like, they literally tricked everybody to buy Burning Godzilla a second time in a clear edition directly from their store with faulty tracking services. It still got to people, but the tracking service third party that they use is one of those ones that when they send it, they say that it's already at the distribution center in America, and then you still are sitting there for 2 weeks while it's in SAL registered. And you're like, why does it keep saying it left the distribution hub and going to my... Yeah, because I did like a whole week's research on ordering directly from Haya and their third-party shipping to America. And I was just like, wait, I could have possibly just lost out on $100 on this figure that was geo-locked to a convention.
That's all. I mean, I think the biggest issue is the way we do it is we can include all these accessories as it's all kind of baked together into the pie, right? So after we sell that first bunch, it's kind of when we can do reissues. And there's also a storage issue because we don't have a big warehouse, right? Like even a Haya or Super 7, we're shipping a lot of stuff out of a garage, honestly. But that's why we rely so heavily on pre-orders, is that we can get inventory in and it goes out. Really, I think a lot of it is these are going to be evolving points over the next 5 years as we hopefully grow and have more products to sell.
So circling back to Galgameth, apparently the movie was distributed by the Kidmark label of Vidmark Entertainment, which later became Trimark Pictures, which then merged with Lionsgate, which is now owned by Starz.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go. and knowing any experience I've had with anyone working with Starz, they don't let anything go. They are the cagiest media company on the planet.
Yep. Sana, can you take the next question?
Yeah. So can you tell us more about expansion into accessory and display sets?
So this is basically our big push this year is we are making this amazing Kaiju City Pack, which we've been promoting pretty heavily on our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook pages the past few months. Really what this is we have noticed people really appreciate when we send a bridge, a destructible building, and all these things. And it's very difficult to actually make diorama scenes for kaiju figures because they're in a very weird scale. I believe most kaiju figures are between 1/400th and 1/700th, depending on which area you're talking about and all the minutiae of scale issues. But really, we've decided we wanted to make we're calling it as the working title, a city pack, where you pay the same as what you pay for one of our regular figures, and you get 20 buildings, you get all the streets, you get cars, you get tanks, you get jets, you get this whole thing, you get explosions, all the things, so that if you want to display your kaiju figures in a city with buildings, with destroyed buildings, with tanks, cars, if you want to create whatever scene you want to create from a film, this is going to be able to do that for you. And it's going to be expandable. It's going to be completely modular. It'll be something that is as close to being able to create your own little kaiju just like city that has ever been made.
All right. What type of accessories are you most looking forward to making in these sets?
So as much as the buildings are the big fun part. And if anyone's seen our Pulgazari buildings where they have these pull-off destructible pieces, those are fun. The part I really love are streets and street signs, because these are details that no one cares about. When, especially if you look at Amazon, when you buy, the name escapes me, who's the Chinese brand who makes the in-scale buildings a lot of photographers use now. They're just plain streets. We've worked really hard to make sure that these street packs that you're going to get with this set are modular in the fact that you can create long straight roads. You'll have T intersections, you'll have four-way intersections, and you'll be able to put billboards down on there that are either in full contact or they're destroyed as well, and kind of give you the options to really play out the highest level of detail possible.
You know, that's actually interesting that you said, like, working on the street level stuff, like, actually that, because I remember, I don't know what year it was, but there was a moment when Bandai was considering doing full-on diorama pieces. I think it was Bandai. I remember they were marketing it, I think, around one of the Gamera figures or something, but they literally were planning to make the actual Tokyo skyline, I think, from Guardian of the Universe. They were trying to do, like, these display dioramas. I think it was, like, a combination between Bandai and Mega House. So, obviously, it's going to be, like, $200 offhand just for, like, 12 buildings and a backdrop and a sort of miniature destroyed Tokyo Tower in the background. But, like, one thing I noticed was they put a lot of detail into the streets, because what was funny is they tried to make Tamashii Effects City, and I think they stopped after, like, what was it, maybe two sets sound out, because the first one, like, the sneak peek was, what was it, Ultraman 50th Anniversary Edition, and they did another one. So, like, between the two, they were experimenting on, I guess you could say, like, 1/12 scale action figures, you know, or 1/10 scale, but between the two, the one that they worked on, I think, with Mega House for Gamera, had the better street level stuff and detail, cost too much money. Then the cheaper one obviously looks like cheap crap. If you've seen the city effects, I don't know if you've ever seen the Ultraman city effect parts. They just look like base plastic, just slightly printed.
Right. And this is another thing that we've because we've been thinking about doing this for 4 years. The issue is we really wanted to make sure we get it right. And the biggest thing we've noticed is scale. Most of these things do not have scale that fit with your kaiju figures. The second being that the main people who sell these currently, iPop Designs and a few other people on Instagram, these are all 3D printed things. They're very not durable, right? You look at it wrong, it's going to break. So those were the other ones. And then also, they usually, when you buy these, they're just big gray pieces of plastic, right? And they paint the windows black and then they call it good. The goal with these is these are going to be painted to the same level as our figures. They're going to be dry brush. They're going to have all these extra detailing so that, you know, it's a plug and play system. I'm not asking for $100 for you to get this set and then be like, all right, well, you got to learn how to paint. You got to become a master builder and all these things. You get it, you take it out of the box, it's going to look great on your shelf, and you're going to be able to make little displays around individual figures, or you can make your entire shelf a cityscape where you have explosions and monster fights, and it looks like it just popped off the screen for you.
What's crazy is you gave me a weird idea to suggest to you, is that you should make a limited batch, though, of a grayscale just for the Gundam modelers or the miniature modelers who do love crazy crap like that. Right. To be like, here's our city, paint it however you want, you know? This is a thing, too. Are the electrical towers a part of this set, or are they going to be a part of another set? Because I saw
those are included with this set.
Okay.
You get 3 of those with it. We're not including, like, wires to go between them because it's kind of too much of a mess to try to make them actually fit.
Yeah, like, I assumed you guys were not going to give wires. Did you at least... I haven't looked clearly enough at the images. Did you design them that people could install wires or no?
So there's a little hole that you could fit like a fishing line through. if that is so as you choose. But kind of including that and getting the factory to do wires is a whole
No,
mess.
that makes sense. Wire and string it at your own risk. I would rather do it myself than worry that the wires come destroyed. Because I've had wire made capes for Hasbro, Bandai, and other stuff where you get the wire and the wire they put in it was faulty and it broke immediately, or it wasn't fully sewn shut, so the wires fell out or whatever. I've had mishaps with like the harder steel wires, but like making it that you can just fish line it, I don't think that's a big deal, because some people are not going to want to do it themselves. Others will go out of their way to do it. This is interesting. Like you said, you wanted to work more at the street level, having more accurate street looks. Are there any like particular, I wouldn't say actual known buildings, but is there any type of, I guess, effect you're looking to recreate with buildings in the future dioramas? Because I bet, what I'm trying to refer is, I'm sure you've seen how in a lot of these tokusatsu productions, they always love doing these very nice sheet glass kind of like buildings that are always just done with like a light mirror reflection. So is there like a possibility you guys might do a mirrored building, or is there like a building you prefer from design from watching Godzilla films, like a typical style, or no?
So I think the plan is this first set is we're hitting very generic buildings. We want things that you could theoretically put in Tokyo, New York, LA, and you could make it work. The goal after that is we're going to try to make sets that are film specific. So one we've talked about already is we want to do a Ginza set that's very -1, 1954 kind of related. And then there's a few other films that really have iconic buildings. Godzilla versus Space Godzilla has the tower name escapes me at the moment, but that's a very sought after one. And then, you talk about Godzilla versus Kong, the kind of those purple and blue buildings from the legendary ones. And so there's tons of expansion packs that we want to do so that you can get the city to look exactly how you want it to, and it can fit with the figures you want. And this first one is like a starter pack is the best way I would describe it. Is this is how you get started. You have your generic buildings, you have the streets, and then right when we'll release Tokyo Tower or Ginza or all these other things, you can pick and choose those ones to really grow your collection.
So how about in terms of like, the city, you have your monster battles and stuff. How about blast effects, explosions, things that are like damage going on?
So we actually are including all of these in with it as well. So there are 2 explosion effects, one that goes on the corner of the top of buildings, another one that goes in the middle. Those then can be attached to the same pegs that the destructible pieces are removed from. So you remove the destructible piece, you put the explosion, it holds right there. All those are going to be cast in a clear plastic with a red and orange effect to really sell the whole fire. And then on top of that, there's another slot in the damaged part that a smoke effect can come out of. And we're going to send you 4 different smoke effects so you can create different kinds of smoke coming from the buildings. And all this is done so that you can have dynamic poses where it's not just destroyed or not destroyed, but also like in progress of being on fire, or, Godzilla's breath effect is hitting it, or whatever you really want to do. The idea is to give you as much modularity as humanly possible.
Cool.
All right. And now this set is the only one intended for this year, or do you have like the idea to maybe do a second one later in the year?
So our goal, depending on how well this first set is received, if we sell a ton of them, the plan is to then have a second expansion set scheduled to be released on the site when these ones are shipping out. So as you are receiving your pre-orders, which my guess is this will ship in August or September, these are a lot simpler to make than articulated toys, but those will be receiving. Then basically the website will be putting up the first expansion pack right after that. And those ones are going to be drastically smaller than this one, and they'll be cheaper. So you get in with your starter set, and then you'll have the expansion packs that are more like $50-$60 each.
All right. Now this doesn't pertain to the city display sets or the blast effects and miniatures, but a friend of mine wanted to know, who was not not one of the people on the panel with us. They asked me when they found out we were talking with you, other than giant monsters, will Titanic Creations focus on like smaller scale monsters, like not necessarily human size, but ones that are not the conventional, 15-foot tall or meter tall monsters? Like, do you want to do some of those types of kaiju, or not really?
So we've had a lot of discussion about doing cryptids flying, right? Like, outside of Bigfoot, everyone has a gorilla figure. It's not really anything fun, but like a Mothman, I think we could do a really cool Loch Ness monster. But like, Wendigo, these kind of public domain monsters are really cool. The Host is another movie that is kind of that like smaller scale giant monster. Really, we want to do a lot of monsters. The giant monsters is kind of the starting point of what I know better, but eventually growing into the figures that are not human sized, but 10 feet tall instead of 100 feet tall is something I think we're very interested in doing. And there's a lot more there than there is in the giant monster realm. And at some point, we're going to run out of monsters that people care about that are 60 feet tall, and we're going to have to diversify our line in a big way.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure if that was going to be the case, because it's like, when you think, Titanic Creations, your name, you think Titan Kaiju, you think it has to be your Kong size, which at minimum King Kong was, I think, in his original film, like 18 feet. And then anything like 20 feet taller is what I think is like standard kaiju. Mighty Joe Young's a little bit shorter, but he's still big enough that, he feels like a kaiju. Son of Kong still feels like a kaiju. I know, like, the Host, it's technically as big as Optimus Prime in truck to trailer mode. So that technically should count as a kaiju. And I know in Japan that kaiju, I believe at one point, could even mean human-sized monsters as well, because there's older movies before they, I think, created the term the kaijin, which meant like, modified monster human. That, sometimes they would refer to that, because Meganula from Rodan is a kaiju, before they made Megagurus, which is a bigger version of it, fully evolved. So obviously there's some technicalities there. This is also a funny one. My friends that I talked to really loved the point when I just jokingly messaged you guys, like, or not messaged you, but at you guys. They were like, would you be interested in doing like the obscure Toei Tokusatsu monsters that, even though they're a part of the bigger brands, they themselves never got like Bandai Monster Series toys, or they did once and then never were reprinted? Because when I sent you the even though it didn't get a lot of reaction on Twitter, friends of mine who, at least look at Twitter but don't have an account saw it and really liked the idea of when I suggested something like doing the Titanosaur / Titanics or the Ginga Men's Galactabeasts from Power Rangers. Like, would there be an idea if you could at least work with Hasbro / Toei? Like, have you guys thought of stuff like that? Because they do have kaiju in those shows, and they barely ever get any merchandise.
I think we definitely would like to do that. Again, it's just kind of feeling it out and seeing what people want, right? Because there is these monsters and Power Rangers and there's even Toho monsters that don't get enough releases, and Gamera monsters and all these monsters that people are completionists at heart, especially collectors. Collectors really want everything. I mean, the goal is always, we just want to make sure that we're hitting the marks of what people really want, right? And I don't mean that in like a, we need to sell 10,000 units Hasbro kind of way. I'm talking about like, the people who are die-hard Power Ranger fans, like, what is the kaiju that like they feel like is being left out of their collection, and they want, something that's going to be different than everyone else's.
Yeah, because I know, like, the ones that I jokingly used are a good example because they did have a product at one point, but that product is very scarce in the secondary market. Like, the Lost Galaxy Megazord, they would have kaiju forms, and then they turned into, obviously, metal forms, then made the robot. Those figures were sold as, like, almost like that destruction place that we mentioned earlier on in Bandai, where they were, like, maybe this tall. They weren't like the full Monster Vinyl series, but they were like this tall, sold as a set of 5 for like $30. And once in a blue moon, it'll show up on the secondary market for almost MSRP or like double the price. And like you never see them again for like another 6 months. And I don't understand why there is a market, because I've even seen on some of the Japanese sides of social media, they always go, "Oh, I would love to have a S.H.MonsterArts," or "Oh, I would love to have a Bandai vinyl of this particular character that is obviously kaiju criteria. Like, they look like a dinosaur, they move like a dinosaur, they look like, Rodan or something. So why the hell is it not giving me a merchandise?" Because it's funny, like you say, they're like, what is it? Giant. I'm pretty sure you're aware of this. Giant Condor from Ebera, I guess, finally got a monster vinyl in like 20 something years or 30 years, and that, like, it either had one or never had one, and Bandai just started to release it.
Yeah, Bandai's been doing this new thing every year around the Godzilla anniversary, where they put up a poll and they let people vote on what new monster should get a vinyl. I think Zilla got one 2 years ago from the same situation.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is Bandai or the license owners aren't capitalizing on that. There is obviously a market for their kaiju, in a sense, because at the end of the day, Bandai technically has the master IP license, I think, in Asia for all of those shows. And
I think Bandai is like, it's kind of crazy how big Bandai is as a company when you actually
in America it feels so much smaller now, but in Asia it's like it is their Hasbro, it is their Mattel.
It's their Disney.
Right.
You got toys, you got video games, you got movies, you got TV shows, you got anime, you got live action. Like they own it all. Like their hands in everything.
And this is another thing, since you mentioned Toho, and kaiju and weekly stuff. So I'm guessing like you are aware of like the Caesar series, Grand Caesar, Just Arisers, and Caesar X, right?
Yeah, briefly. So that my main expertise. Really have been kind of tiptoeing around a lot of the Super Sentai stuff. I've never, but I'm aware of it, and I definitely have people I talk to who know a lot more about it, and I lean on them for their expertise in those areas.
Yeah, because I noticed there's always this weird disconnect within the Tokusatsu fandom itself. There are obviously your Toei people. There are the Toei centric, then there are the Kaiju Ultraman centric, and then there's just, we are Godzilla Gamera. If you are not Godzilla Gamera, we don't care. And I just sit there and I go, but Ultraman's created by Eiji, and they're like, we don't care. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
like that.
The Godzilla purists are hardcore.
They really can be. Like, it's I used to have to deal with the hardcore side of like Toei fans, and then they lightened up and started watching Ultraman. But trying to get like a diehard Godzilla fan that will not acknowledge Power Rangers or its source material Super Sentai or its compendiums at Toei or even Ultraman is like wild to me. It's like giant monsters though, giant battles, and they're like,
this is the thing you like, right?
They're like, no Godzilla. There's no giant turtle. And I'm just like, y'all weird. Y'all weirding me out, man. Sada, do you got any other questions?
Let me think. I'm trying to think of what's a good final question here.
Yeah, because we're pretty much wrapped up. We've gone through the entire
Gone through the
list
most
of
of the
stuff
list.
we think.
Would you like to speak on like the goals as a company? Like, what do you want to do with Titanic Creations? Like, as like the broad sense, like, you know, what's your goals as your company?
I guess what you're saying is like, what's your 3 to 5 year plan?
I guess.
So I feel like the long-term goal is we want to, biggest priority number one is we want to grow our customer base. It's the only really thing that matters in a big picture kind of way. Going from being able to sell 1,000 figures to 3,000 figures is a dramatic change in how we're able to operate, how we're able to do things. We can fulfill orders better. We can. There's a myriad of reasons that going that jump is so helpful for us as a company. Really, we want to be able to be the company that fills your collection, right? We're never going to be the company that produces Godzilla or, you know, the big things that are coming out each year from Hollywood. That's not going to be what we're going to fill ourselves in. We're going to be the company that, you know, you want to have your diorama pieces. Well, you come to Titanic Creations for it. You want to have the Cloverfield figure that isn't the $1,000 Hasbro one that has never been reissued. You want to come to Titanic Creations for that. And kind of like when you want to find a figure that, you know, doesn't seem like it would have a figure made, that you would search Titanic Creations and we'd be able to provide that for you. That's the long-term goal. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of licenses. It's a lot of really angry phone calls with 90-year-old men who don't want me calling them and offering them money. But all these things are things we want to eventually get to and be able to, you know, be the company that fills in those missing pieces in your collection.
All right. No, that's a perfect way to pretty much end it on. We thank you for giving us like 70 minutes of your time, because we were like we don't want to bombard this guy with too many things, because I know some of your podcasts and interviews prior have gone probably anywhere between 45 minutes to a whole on 2 hours. I think you've been on certain podcasts with people.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I love talking about. I mean, this is my passion. I love, you know, giant monsters, toys, and really getting to connect with people who also really enjoy this.
Yeah, no, I think that's the funniest thing is like I started very similar. I had Godzilla and Ultraman and even Power Rangers growing up, and it's like I love talking kaiju. I love talking the toys. I love doing everything I can in that field. And I also love like just being able to reach out to all the types of creators, like the people who make the shows, the people who were in the shows, the people who make the toys and stuff like that. It's always just cool to find out what they're doing, like being able to talk to people like Kyle Wodiga at Super 7 to talk about that, and now you who are working on other kaiju properties that a lot of people are like, those are like dead IPs, who cares, they're not Godzilla and Gamera. And I'm like, people still care. Like Gorgo, it still gets on TMC. Gorgo is aired on Svengoolie. Like obviously if it's on TV like once in a blue moon in a rotational like seasonal thing, obviously someone has to care about it.
Right. And I think it wasn't too long ago when Godzilla was this incredibly obscure thing that most people didn't know about. I mean, I was talking to a friend from high school, and he's like, yeah, Godzilla's in Fortnite now. And never would have thought that would have happened, you know, back in 2009, 2010.
Yeah, no, it's wild because growing up, 98, the 98 film screwed up like the perception of Godzilla. Even though I met the guy who performed as Godzilla, Kurt Carley, and did an interview with him, it did ruin the perception for some people. Even though the cartoon was great, the perception was ruined over here. And then it didn't help that due to the circumstances of 9/11, for a while, channels were afraid to put Godzilla on because of the build and destruction causing traumatic just PTSD in the people who lived it live and saw it and knew people who were affected by that day. So like I sort of get that, because I remember that September there was actually a Godzilla marathon every Saturday on AMC, and when 9/11 happened, they canceled the marathon and replaced it with Frankie Avalon and like Annette Funicello movies and Elvis movies and all these old 1940s, 50s, and like 60s, like very, Americana movies, Greasers and just rock and roll sing-along songs to try to like lighten the mood. And here I am as like a 10-year-old kid going, where'd my Godzilla go?
We're Big Monster, right?
Yeah, exactly. Big Monster. Yeah. So that was one of those things. And then, all of a sudden Monsterverse happens, and then all these movies, Shin Godzilla -1, and we're back on top, and everyone's like, oh, I like Godzilla. And I'm like, that's not what you said to me growing up.
You are a poser. I know exactly. Right.
Exactly. I remember like all of my friends now who say they love the Showa films, and I'm just like, I tried to put them on, and you would complain to me to put on a Heisei film. You would complain to me to put on the 98 film. You'd be like, put on the one where Sum 41 plays and kills Zilla, and I'm like, you guys were like, nah. It's just wild.
It's bizarre. Like zeitgeist of the culture and how it's
exactly.
changed.
It's like the same. I think anything that's come from Japan, like Godzilla and anime, for some reason around that 2000s bubble had this weird thing of it was already the cool thing. Everyone knew it was cool, but 2000s happened, and then it became bad to like it for like another decade, and then like 2012 or something, 2014, everyone's like, it's starting to get cool again. We're back in, baby.
We're back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how I've always seen it. And I didn't really touch on this too much when we were asking you like what went into making the monsters, but is there any like do's and don'ts for you? Like what do you this is the, I guess the real last question is before we wrap up is, what for you personally is your do's and don'ts when designing a kaiju?
So when we're like doing something, like, are you talking more original or like when we're designing the art?
When you're doing like your original stuff, like what do you think is a do and don't? Like, what do you think is like, oh, this is too over the top, or this is too flashy and unrealistic?
So we like have very few rules, I would say. We have very much a design language that we want to lean into. We, for lack of a better word, I feel like we almost lean into the 90s super over the top aesthetic a little more than we maybe should. We throw a lot of spikes. Nosferatu has more spikes than he probably should, and Titanicus looks like he's been a bodybuilder for his entire life. He's hellaciously jacked for no reason. And so really what we look for is we want things that are just, it has to have something that wows, right? Something that like you're not going to see it anywhere. Nosferatu has these weird wings that every time I've talked to Patrick about drawing them, he's like, they do not make any sense as a two-dimensional object, and he hated drawing them every single time. And then like Titanicus has a big iceberg spike that is going to look a lot better in clear plastic than it did in the original release. And Perfixus is probably the one that I feel like we failed the most with on this, but he still has these kind of like skeleton wings that separate it from most dragons. And then Scraeus, he just has this weird, like, he's a snake and a cobra. And every convention we ever go to, right, even people who don't like it always go, ooh, look at that. And they walk by because they're like, oh, look, it's a snake cobra. And it always has to have something that jumps off the page because there's so much that gets made and everything, and it all kind of blends together into the same thing if it doesn't have something interesting. And we also really love to give it unique colors just because that kind of fits into our design language better.
All right. Yeah, no, because I realized we never really touched upon that, but I thank you for that. And like I said moments ago, I thank you for just being able to chill with us on this at the time of recording Thursday night, for us and that. It's
the whole mountain time makes it a little easier.
Exactly. Living in mountain time does, because I'm one of those guys who I work best at around 9 p.m. usually. It's my free hours. My folks are either easing down for the night to go to bed, or they're out watching stuff, watching stuff in the living room, and I'm just quietly on the one side of the house where no sounds are bothering me working or whatnot.
Right.
And for, sound out, I believe he's also Mountain Time like
I'm
you.
also
So
Mountain Time, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's not too late right now.
yeah, no, it was great having this conversation, and hopefully me and Sound get a chance to read the comics eventually, and we can actually just talk to you about the writing process of crafting your world, crafting your stories, because they do look interesting. Like you said, Raiders of the Lost Ark, very inspired, which is really cool and whatnot. But for people, like we said, Titanic Creations, you got to go check them out. Check out their web shop. They do have quite a bit of the stuff still in stock. They do have the ability to use the Affirm interest system. Now, this is another small question. Are you locked to Affirm? Like, can you ever option for other places like Shop Pay in the future, or is it just you can only do Affirm?
So this is the whole website thing. So currently the website is on WooCommerce, not on Shopify, and Shop Pay is exclusively through Shopify. And we've been testing the idea of migrating over, as Shop Pay and Shopify has a lot of benefits to it, especially given that we can't accept PayPal right now,
Okay.
probably ever again. So that is something that's probably going to happen in the next few months. I don't want to confirm that, but that there should be more flexibility in payment options in the near future.
The only reason I had brought this up last minute was when I saw Affirm, I knew people have a love-hate relationship with Affirm. And Shop Pay has become the instant craze, the instant rise, and the more, how should I say, kind to the consumers. Like, it's like beneficial to the consumer. So like we got it here. He says within the next couple of months he'll probably be moving it or whatnot. But no promises. So you can check out their store. You do have payment plans, at least through Affirm at this time, where it's like paying for, which does help for these figures that are made to like 1 of 1,000. You have, if you buy 1 or 3, like you said, for resellability.
Right.
And I guess, if it's sold out now, just wait for those other variants.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot of new stuff that will be up on the site in March, April.
And I'm guessing that's gearing up for G-Fest, since it's usually around like May and June.
G-Fest is the week after July 4th every year. So we put stuff up for order there, and then it all gets in stock, hopefully in July. And we have a really fun weekend there.
Yeah, so, they'll restock, revamp, and you'll probably see them there. And we'll have all the information for you guys down in the description below, as per usual. So you can know how to get a hold of Titanic Creations, just to shop or just say hi and check them out. And hopefully one day we'll have you back soon, talk about comics. And as per usual, we're Hero Club. You can follow us at hero-club.com. Follow us across social media using Hero Club for Life. That is with the number 4, as we always have to state. And we'll see you guys next time with whoever our next guest will be, or if we decide to bring back a podcast or two. We don't know yet. So until then, we'll see you guys then.